Gents, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing okay. 5 dating mistakes that cause men pain in the long run. Mistake number 1, choosing a woman just based on her looks. Now look, I know, us guys, we do have a proclivity to want to be around beautiful women. And that's just part of your nature. However, you got to understand that when you are going into a serious relationship, looks alone are not enough. You know, you're going to be spending so much time with somebody. When you're in a relationship with them, it's not just about being able to look at her and feel a certain type of way. It's about compatibility. It's about you two being on the same page and working as a team together. You know, what you'll find is, of course, there's going to be a while at the start of a relationship if you're with, you know, a really nice looking woman where you're just enamored, you're in love. But, you know, if that is the only thing about her or the only thing that you value, what you'll start to see over time is that there will be some cracks. There'll be some things that you didn't notice. There will be some things that you were blinded by. And again, you know, there's nothing wrong with having a set of standards. Women certainly have standards with men. One of the biggest is height. You know, as we know, Tinder preferences of girls, you know, there are a lot of girls on Tinder that will actually filter out men that are shorter than 6 foot. And to be honest, you know, the majority of men are under 6 foot. So, you know, women have preferences, men have preferences. However, challenge yourself when you're going into relationships to put more emphasis on other things. You know, yes, you might want to be with somebody who is visually attractive. To be honest, I think that's the norm. It's a big part of relationships, that physical connection, that physical attraction. But at the same time, there is a lot more to a relationship than just being attractive or her just being attractive. You've really got to think long term. You've got to think about compatibility. And that brings me on to mistake number 2, choosing to ignore obvious red flags. So look, a lot of guys in the courtship stage of a relationship, quite frankly, don't do enough probing. They don't do enough investigating. And maybe this ties in with mistake number 1, prioritizing looks. A lot of guys will be courting a really good looking girl, and because they're so in love and enamored with how she looks, you know, they might say, oh, she's so fit, she's so stunning, etc., etc. They look away when there are certain things that come up that are questionable. They look away when there is a red flag or two. And they say, well, you know what, maybe this was a little bit concerning, but, you know, she's so smoking. I'm not going to find anybody else like that. And what happens over time is that if you make too many concessions and you ignore too many red flags, you can find yourself 6 months down the line in a relationship that is just chaos. You know, you're being disrespected. She's not making you feel good in yourself. She's not making you feel confident. You don't feel like you're on the same page. You feel like there's a clear and obvious disconnect. And a way to prevent this is by being hyper attentive in that early stage. You know, you've got to ask questions. You've got to probe into her life. You know, dive a little bit deeper than the superficial, surface level questions. You know, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite TV show? You'll get the answers for sure. But you know, you really want to be asking, I don't know, for example, What do you envision your life looking like in 10 years' time? You know, she might give you an answer that horrifies you. You know, ask her questions like, okay, so 10 years from now, do you see yourself married? Do you see yourself having children? And look, if she turns around and goes, no, absolutely not, I think that's gross, I think marriage is disgusting, and I want to be in a polygamous relationship, then, you know that if you're a person that wants kids, if you're a person that wants marriage at some point, a serious relationship, that woman's not for you. But a lot of guys are not doing this important questioning. And look, she's not under interrogation, right? We're not trying to sit her down and subpoena her in front of a bunch of judges and jurors and senators or politicians, however you want to say it. But what you're trying to do is establish to see if there's anything that is potentially a red flag. What you're trying to do is test compatibility. And again, a lot of guys don't even get there because they get so fixated on the superficial things and they get so fixated on looks that they ignore obvious red flags. Now look, the mistake number 3 links in a little bit to mistake number 2, and it's not evaluating how she treats other people. So this is sort of within the process of getting to know somebody as well. You've got to be really careful to look at how she speaks to her mother and father, her brothers and sisters, her friends, how she speaks about them. You know, if you're around a girl that you're interested in and you're looking to take things further, but you notice she speaks to her father in a really disrespectful way, she maybe shouts at him or swears at him, or, you know, equally as bad, her mother. You know, I've seen this before. These are walking, talking advertisements for how things are going to be with you down the line. You know, if she treats her parents in that way, her siblings, her close friends, friends that maybe she's had for a really long time, how's she going to treat you? You know, you want to look out for these things, even how she treats strangers. So get out and about with her, you know, go to public places. You know, when the homeless man asks for a couple quid, some change, does she scowl and ignore, or does she say, no, I haven't got any, I'm afraid, sorry, or indeed, I do, here you go? Does she exhibit displays of kindness to other people? Because, you know, they say that the biggest predictor of future behaviour is past behaviour. So, or present behaviour as well. You know, if she's with you and in the moment she's doing something nice, that's an indicator that down the line she's going to behave in that way. And you want to be testing these things. You want to be seeing what's going on. Now, of course, look, in the early stage of relationships, what do we all do? We put on our best selves. You know, it's just a subconscious human behaviour. When we meet somebody new, we always try and impress, whether that's relationships, whether that's friendships, whether that's professionally. You know, I do think that we should maintain those standards. That's something we should aim for. Of course, there are times, you know, where we're not as kind to the people that are closest to us as we should be. We should make it a mission to be kind to them and to be consistent with how we treat them. But look, you want to pay attention, you know, because this behaviour, how she treats other people, it's a sign. And there are always signs, you know, and if you miss these signs, it can break a relationship, it really can. Because there are things that were very obvious 6 months ago that you should have seen, that you should have, you know, acted on, maybe even walked away from that relationship. But if you're not careful and you don't look for these things, it can cause you pain down the line, you know, especially so. You know, it's very important how she treats her father. And you've got to look at how she works with and gets along with male figures in her life. You know, you don't want to be finding yourself with a girl that is extremely combative with any male figure in her life, because it's the biggest indicator that she's going to give you a headache. And look, when you're trying to build a life for yourself, when you're trying to scale things up, the worst thing you want to happen is to come home every day and there's this wrecking ball that's trying to bring everything down. You know, you want to know that she is respectful to her father, mother as well, just as important. But particularly, you want to see that she has positive relationships, respectful relationships with male figures in her life. You know, her father, maybe her uncle, her brothers. You want to see that there's something good going on there. You know, it's a big red flag if those relationships are not in a good place. And look, the caveat I will make here is that we cannot choose our family. And, you know, she may have really abusive male figures in her life, you know, and that's not her fault. What I'm talking more about here is that when you see clear and obvious disrespect from her to them, you know, because sometimes it does happen where people have abusive family members. People have, you know, brothers and sisters and dads that abuse them, and, you know, it doesn't have to be on a physical level, it can be on an emotional level. And you don't want to be blaming her for that. That's not her fault. What I'm talking about specifically is instances where she disrespects them. And she doesn't, you know, have a cooperative relationship with male figures in her life, and it's a her problem. Okay? You want to be careful for that. And look, habit number 4, choosing a woman on mistake. Mistake number 4, choosing a woman that does not align with your purpose, that does not align with your values. Look, you're going to find that even in relationships, you're different people. You're not going to have the same interests all the time. You know, maybe, like me, you like watching the WWE, which is just this weird and wacky, silly, goofy sport, right? Most girls think it's nuts. Most girls think it's crazy. You know, I don't expect my partner to like the same things as me. But look, there are going to be differences. But on a, you know, on a serious note, on the really serious things in life, you know, how you treat other people, how you like to live, you know, how you like to operate on a day-to-day basis, even so far as, you know, the impact that you want to have on the world, you got to make sure that you're with somebody who is not going to harm the process. You know, ideally you're with somebody who's going to aid the process and add to the process. But you definitely don't want to be with somebody that is holding you back and trying to drag you in the wrong direction. And look, so long as you want to have a good impact on the world, and you want to do that in a legal, ethical, and morally just way, you know, you deserve that in a partner. So look, if you're going into relationships and you're dating, it's very important to establish or try and find out and probe beforehand whether there are going to be some really obvious conflicts, because again, this is one of those things that causes men a lot of pain down the line. They don't do enough investigation, and, you know, they feel like they're losing themselves 6 months later because they want to do something and they're just getting pulled in the opposite direction. And they feel, you know, in the worst cases, like a broken man. So ensure that you two are, you know, maybe not exactly on the same page. You don't see everything the same way. I think it's important that, you know, when you're with somebody, they can call you out if you have genuinely stepped out of line, or you genuinely are doing something that is not going to be good for you, and vice versa, right? But more than not, you want to be with somebody who is aiding the process and helping you towards your goals, helping you to become a better man. Okay, so look out for that, because it saves you a lot of pain. Asking smart questions, you know, digging a little bit deeper into her philosophy and how she sees the world. Very important. And look, this ties in with mistake number 4. But mistake number 5 is that, you know, when you are courting a girl and when you're starting to get things in a more serious way, and maybe at this point you're dating, right? Not establishing a clear set of behaviors, how you are both going to operate in that relationship. You know, if you're cohabiting and you're living together, what are her expectations and what are your expectations? You know, what are things that you want her to do and what are things that she wants you to do? Do you agree? Do you have terms? Is this something that's going to work? Because if you don't set expectations, and again, you don't need to be super strict with this, I'd encourage you not to be. But if you don't have a guideline or a, you know, a prediction of some sort of how you are going to operate on a day-to-day basis, some things that you are not going to engage in as a couple. For example, I really don't like when you do X, or if you did X. You know, I was with somebody previously and she did this. Can we just agree that you are not going to do that and I am not going to do that? And she'll say, yes, we can agree. But if she says no, well, then you know it's a big red flag. You want to be sure that you have some kind of code of conduct. I know it sounds weird, I know it sounds a bit formal, but essentially you want to ensure that going forward there are a set of behaviors that you have agreed upon. You know, you will do this, I will do this, we will do this, we will not do this. Because ultimately, this saves you a lot of pain. And if she violates, you know, an agreement that you've both made, then it's crystal clear. You know, there's no room for debate. There's no room for discussion. She's violated the terms of the relationship. And it's not a contract. You know, some people do this stuff, famous people. But by doing this, you know, you're essentially establishing the principles of the relationship. How you're going to behave, how you're going to treat one another, how you're going to act. And it's so important. And if you get it right, you can have an incredible relationship and you can grow and grow and grow. But if you get it wrong, you're going to waste a lot of time. You know, so you want to be ensuring that going forward, if you haven't taken your dating too seriously, you're starting to implement some of these behaviors. You're starting to be a bit more thorough and look at things a little bit deeper. Because one of the main mistakes us guys make is by prioritizing superficial things and ignoring huge red flags. And you know, if guys started to implement this, men would be a lot happier, but women would be a lot happier as well. So start diving a little bit deeper. And yeah, the last one, again, try and establish a code of conduct. Try and establish that going forward, you both have an agreed upon set of principles or behaviors as to how you are going to act or not act. It's going to save you a lot of pain. Anyway, guys, if you took some value from this video today, do me a favor, smash the like button on this video, comment your thoughts down below, and consider subscribing to the channel if you are new around here. If you are already a subscriber and you've been watching the channel for a while, consider sharing my channel with any friends that you think might take value from it. It's referrals like that that help me to grow the channel even more and reach a wider audience of guys who might take some value from what I do. Again, check out the links down below in the description of this video. Join the Discord. There's 65 guys in there right now making great progress both personally and professionally. So if you're a young guy who wants a community full of like-minded individuals, aspirational individuals, maybe some guys that are looking to get into entrepreneurship, then that's the place for you. Join the community, absolutely free. And look, if you want to work with me on a one-to-one basis, click on the link down below in the description of the video, book yourself a call. I offer a free 30-minute call with everybody. You want to get to know me, I want to get to know you and see if I can genuinely help you, because sometimes, look, I can't. But look, if you're interested, that's available. Click the link and I'll see you on the other side. As always, guys, thank you for your time and attention, and I'll see you in the next one.